Hi, I'm Shari Blaukopf. Welcome to my kitchen. I often sketch small still lifes in here, and today I have these beautiful green onions that I just received from the farmer. Let me show you how I sketch these in ink and watercolor. I love the shapes of the roots and the green parts and how they overlap, so I'm going to draw them today. I'm using some Fabriano Artistico hot press paper, which is a smooth paper. This size is 9 by 12. I have a platinum carbon ink pen with an extra fine nib and platinum carbon waterproof permanent ink in it. And I have a Da Vinci brush, a squirrel mop brush, a number 1, I think. I don't know. I've used it a lot, so it's kind of faded, but I think it's a 1. And that holds a lot of water. So let's get started. And where do you start? The shape is basically a shape that goes something like this, and all of those greens come down here, and then the roots and all the tangle of roots is over here and all the dirt. So I might just start over here and then come out and go around. I have to plan it a little bit to make sure it kind of all fits on the paper. Let's get started with the roots. I'm going to start by putting that big root ball over here. And I'll just draw the kind of outline of the shape, and then I'll come back in and do the detail. And then there's these big overlapping roots that come kind of down here. And then there's another shape of a second root ball that's on the side. So it's kind of like hair. It's like tangled curly hair over here. Comes like this. And here's the end part of that root ball. So I'm going to make a stronger line there, and I'm going to have the whites of the onion come out a bit like this. So I'm going to draw that shape first, and that big mass comes kind of up and then comes down, and then there's some pieces that come down like this and cross over. And I'm just putting those in roughly first, and then I'm going to start drawing all of the overlapping shape, just to make sure that I get the pieces in that I want. And I did that pretty lightly, and then there's a few little pieces that come out on the ends. So once I have that in there, and I know that all those darks are going to be right in here somewhere, all those overlapping pieces, then I can start to draw the strands. So this is all dark in here, and I'm not going to ink it all in because I'm going to use that for paint. And now I'm looking at the shapes of these roots. And I'm holding my pen lightly. I can give a little more pressure if I push down on it, but I'm basically holding it lightly and getting those wavy shapes in here. And of course it does help if I hold it lightly. And there's a little bit of dark down there. So sometimes I just emphasize where the darks are. And then this other part, which is a little bit in shadow, I'll bring that out starting from here. Bring that out and maybe bring it, it actually comes quite a bit further down, so I'm going to bring that down over here as well. Have those two kind of overlapping root balls right there. Okay, now I'm ready to start the green onion part, and now I'm looking a little more carefully. So there's the white of the onion, and then it goes to green. I'm going to bring these parallel pieces, and there is some overlap in here, so this piece gets a little wider and gets a little greener and then flips around. And then there's another one right here, and then there's one underneath. So once I get those light pieces in, then I have a direction for the whole big shape. And now I'm going to start to look at the shapes that are on top, and that's what, for me, makes it easy to follow, is I start by drawing the pieces that are on top. So there's one, this is the dark green top, so there's one top here. And doing this is what helps me figure out. So if I do the top piece, then I can see that underneath that, there's another piece that goes like this. So if I have things continue underneath, so here's that, again, that top piece, and then there's another green, let's call them, that goes underneath. So if I have one on top of another, it doesn't really matter where they end up. They all kind of curve around and go in. But starting at that top piece really helps me. And then I see that behind this one it bends, and then there's another piece that comes down here. And then under that there's another one. I knew when I opened the bag of these spring onions that I had to draw them. I also sometimes look at the negative shape. I look at the shape of the white counter rather than looking at the shape of those green tops. So I look at the spaces between things. And the thing that you actually can't really get from this is the smell of these, which is very strong. Oh, this oniony, green onion smell. Sometimes I get lost also. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what is this piece and where does it go? Now that I've drawn a lot of the pieces that are on the top, then I can start drawing the pieces that are under. And now I really try to follow a little more carefully how they fit together. And if you get lost, just make sure that, try to connect them. So I look at, I look at the negative shapes, I look at the pieces underneath and in between, and sometimes I invent a little bit. As long as you get those top pieces right, you're probably going to be okay. And then sometimes I check, I kind of follow and make sure that things come out in the right place. And if it's okay if you go over some lines if you're not sure, it's also okay to do that. The one thing that I don't do is there's some shadows on the table, on the counter, and the one thing that I don't do is I don't outline the shadows. That will just be in watercolor. So I'm just checking everything now. I'm pretty sure. I hope I have all the pieces. And I can always add a few more after if I want to. I can add another ink line or two, but I think I basically have a sense of this this big root ball, all of these beautiful roots coming out from there. and all of the white of the onion, of the spring onion, and then the green going towards the green of the spring onion. And the only last thing that I'm going to add is a little bit of the lines on these tops. Okay, I think that's it. Now I'm going to make sure this is really dry, that this ink is really dry. I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes, and then I'm going to come back and put some color on it. I'm going to start painting these, and I have a paper towel with me just in case my brush gets too wet. And I'm going to start by maybe painting the very darkest part of this, which is that root ball. So I'm going to take some umber color, that makes a beautiful dark. And I'm going to mix in a little bit of French ultramarine, and we'll see if I can get a nice, rich and beautiful dark and put it down on that paper. I may even put a little bit of burnt sienna in there. Now this brush holds a lot of water, but I'm holding it lightly and loosely. Just a little change of color in there. I'm going to take a little of my Prussian blue too, and a little bit of red, just so it's not all the same. And there's some of that dark all the way down here, and even a little bit within the root. So I'm going to put just a little bit of it within the root ball like that. So that's going to be my darkest dark in here. Get a little bit of raw sienna and just put just a little yellowish tinge in here in that root color. And I want what's happening here, which is just to let the dark color blend into there and get a little bit of gray. And that's why I like this brush. It holds a lot of water, and I can make things move around on the paper because it stays wet for a long time. And then I'm going to just take a little bit of the diluted color and make just a little light shadow under here. And I may keep this for the shadow on the table surface after too. And now I'm going to start putting in the green, and I'm going to treat the green as one shape. It's going to go from light over here where the whitish parts of the onion are, and then it's going to come down to a deep bluish green. And it may take me 2 layers to get the shadow color. So I'm going to take a little bit of my Hooker's green and a little bit of my yellowish raw sienna and get that light color. I'm even going to put a little bit of Hansa yellow in there. That's going to be my light green. So I want to have a big contrast between the light areas and the darks. And you notice how lightly I'm working to start with. So I don't think of these as one strand, one stalk or another. I paint it all as one big shape, and then I'm going to come back in after and separate with shadows and with darks. So I'm going to go all the way up here, and now I'm going to start to darken it with a little bit more of my Hooker's green, which is a beautiful green, and some ultramarine blue. And then I'm going to get that beautiful bluish deep green. And let's let that blend when it's wet. When you're working with something that has a lot of green, it's nice to incorporate a little bit of red in there. So I took a little bit of my burnt sienna, and I'm going to put that in some places, just to give it a little bit of variety. When it's still wet, you can also, like I did over there, add a little bit of dark. So before it dries completely, I'm going into those parts that I know are going to be underneath, and I'm going to add a little dark. I have a bit of orange on my palette, so I put a little in there. Sometimes when it's too green, I add a little bit of red or orange just to tone it down. And that works with any color if you have take the complement to neutralize it or soften it a little bit. And so with green, the complement is red, so I take a red or a reddish orange. Let's see if I have enough wash to do a little bit of splatter in there. Okay. I'm going to let this dry, and as soon as it's dry, I'm going to put the shadows on. I'm going to put the shadows and the darks in here, and then the shadows on the table. Now that this is dry, I can see that I'm really happy with some of these little runs that happened in here, the transition from light to yellowy green to darker green and then to bluish green. And now I'm going to start drawing a little more painting a little more carefully the shapes that are in between things. So I'm mixing up a little bit of Prussian blue and ultramarine and a little of my Hooker's green to get this nice, rich, dark green. And now I'm painting in between the shapes. And it might take several layers, so I'll start not too dark, and then I'll come back with a final dark. And now as I put in these darks, you start to see the dimension and the volume in this shape. So I'm starting not too dark, one step darker, and then I will go 2 steps darker later on. The darkest parts are really underneath here. And I love painting all these small shapes. As I do this, I try to remember what's on top and what's underneath. So make sure you leave some light parts where one stalk overlaps another. Sometimes there's a little shadow. Make sure you're using a brush that holds a lot of water and a lot of paint. That's important. Okay, and now I think I'm going to put a little bit of shadow on the surface because I think that's going to be really nice. I'm going to dry this, and more importantly, I'm going to clean my palette and then come back and do that. Okay, this is all dry, and let's mix up a little bit of shadow color. I used lots of ultramarine, so let's keep the shadow color along the same lines. I'm going to take a little ultramarine and maybe a little burnt sienna, and that always makes a nice gray for shadow. I don't want it to be too dark, so I'll mix the color and then come back. I think I might put a little bit of red in it. I think that would be nice. And then I'll test it out. Now, right here I have light coming in all directions. So let's test this out and see what it looks like. Yeah, I just want to show that there's a surface here. And I'm going to, sometimes I soften the shadow like that. And I'll probably come back and put a few more ink lines in here in that root system. But I wanted to start first by just painting it. I'm going to put the shadows in here, and I'll put some crossing across. And there's a big shadow right under this main piece here. So I'm going to get rid of all the white under here. I really want, because this root part is kind of heavy, I really want to show that that's right on the table. And then these pieces, because they lift up, their shadows are a little further away. So I'm going to have the shadows kind of crossing under here and not too dark, because if I make them too dark, it's going to look like it's part of the onion itself, and I don't want that. I would just want them to be pretty light. Make sure when you make this shadow mix that you make enough of it so that you can do all of this all at the same time without having to make new shadow color. And a bit like I was getting lost drawing these, I get lost when I'm doing the shadow, so I have to keep looking up and looking down and making sure that I'm in the right place. Okay, I think that's good for the shadow, and the last step that I want is to put a little more ink. And sometimes in these spaces you can see crossing roots, so I'm going to make it a little, I'm going to put a little more ink in here. That's why it's good not to overwork the ink, because you can always come back after. There's also a little bit of dirt in there. And now I'm going to put just a little more detail on the onions themselves. They have beautiful lines within them, veins. Okay, I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching me sketch these spring onions in ink and watercolor. If you want to learn how to do it yourself, check out my online course, Sketching Markets in Ink and Watercolor. I'll leave a link for you in the description. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.